Welcome to Shatter.
Help me reach 5,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. Be a man and stop begging for intimacy. She didn't yell it. She snapped it. Quiet. Precise. Like a verdict. We were standing in the kitchen when she said it. Early morning light. The kind that makes everything look unfinished. She was already dressed for her shift, black apron folded over her arm, keys in her hand. The smell of cheap coffee followed her everywhere lately. Dunkin' cups on the counter, receipts in her pockets, stories about customers I never asked for. I didn't answer. Cops learn early that silence carries more weight than explanations. She took my lack of response as weakness. That was the mistake. She kissed my cheek like it was a favor, not affection, and walked out. I watched her through the window as she got into her car, confident, unbothered, certain she still had leverage. I drove to work in my Toyota Camry. Same route, same radio station, same calm hands on the wheel. On the surface, nothing changed. Inside, something shut off. Not anger, not hurt. A switch. For months, intimacy had been a negotiation I kept losing. Timing was wrong. She was tired. I was too intense. Then came the eye rolls. The jokes. The way she'd scroll her phone while I talked. Hulu murmuring in the background at night, like a substitute for connection. I kept adjusting, giving space, asking differently, asking less, still asking. That morning, I stopped. At the precinct, my partner asked if I was good. I said yes because yes was accurate. I felt clear, clearer than I had in a long time. When your job trains you to read situations without emotion, you recognize patterns fast. Power shifts, control dynamics, who's testing boundaries and who's enforcing them. That night, she came home wired, buzzing with stories. A new guy at the gym had made her laugh. A trainer. All energy and teeth. The type I used to smirk at without meaning to. She watched my face closely while she talked, waiting for a reaction. I gave her none. We ate dinner without tension. That confused her more than an argument would have. She reached for me out of habit, not desire. I stepped back casually, like it didn't register. Later, as she slept, I stared at the ceiling and understood something that hadn't been clear before. She thought withholding intimacy made her powerful. She had no idea what would happen when I stopped wanting it from her at all. The first real crack didn't come from her. It came from someone who had no reason to lie to me. 2 days after that morning, I ran into her co-worker by accident. I stopped at Dunkin' near the station, same place my wife worked early shifts before switching locations. The girl behind the counter recognized me immediately. She stiffened the way people do when they know something they didn't mean to know. She didn't say much. She didn't have to. Her eyes lingered too long, then dropped. She mentioned my wife had been really happy lately. Said it like an observation, not a compliment. Then she added one unnecessary detail. That my wife had been stopping by the gym after work more often. Not training. Hanging around. I nodded, paid, left. No confrontation. No questions. On the drive back, I replayed the way my wife had washed my face the other night, searching for jealousy like proof of relevance. I realized something uncomfortable. This wasn't new. It had momentum. You don't suddenly glow with confidence unless you've been feeding it somewhere else. That evening we went to Costco together, something we hadn't done in weeks. Big cart, fluorescent lights, couples moving in parallel lanes. She talked the whole time, filling space. I answered when necessary. Short. Neutral. The way I talk to civilians when I don't want to escalate anything. Halfway through the store, she reached for my arm like she always did. I adjusted my grip on the cart instead. Didn't make it obvious. Just enough. She noticed. At checkout, she leaned closer than needed and said something about how distant I'd been. Not accusatory. Curious. Testing. I said I'd been busy. Which was true. I'd been busy observing. That night, she showered longer than usual. Took her phone with her. When she came to bed, she smelled different. Not perfume. Effort. She pressed herself against me like she expected instinct to take over. It didn't. I rolled onto my side and let Hulu play behind us, the screen flickering like a stand-in for everything we weren't saying. She stayed still for a long time, then shifted away sharply, wounded pride masquerading as irritation. I lay there awake, not angry, focused. There's a moment in every investigation when you stop chasing statements and start watching behavior. When you stop asking what someone says and start tracking what they do when they think no one's paying attention. That was the moment I understood she wasn't just pulling away from me. She was testing how replaceable I was. And for the first time since we'd been married, I didn't feel the urge to prove her wrong. I didn't go looking for proof right away. That's what people expect. Rage, snooping, desperate confirmation. I did none of that. I let things breathe. Patterns surface on their own when you stop interfering. What changed first was her routine. The timing. She used to be predictable. Morning shifts, home by mid-afternoon, complaining about customers, collapsing on the couch with Hulu running while she scrolled her phone. Now the gaps were wider. Errands that took too long. A gym bag that never used to exist. A phone that never left her hand. I noticed the silence around her notifications. The way the screen tilted away from me. The way she smiled at nothing. One night, while she was in the shower, her phone lit up on the nightstand. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. The preview alone was enough. A name I recognized from her stories. Short messages. Familiar confidence. No romance in the words. Just logistics. Availability. Assumption. That's when it clicked. This wasn't about desire. It was about leverage. A few days later, I stopped by Best Buy after work. No announcement. No shared excitement. I bought myself a new laptop, paid with my card, carried it out alone. It wasn't about the device. It was the act. Doing something for myself without looping her in, without seeking approval. When I set it up at home, she asked what it was for. I said work. She didn't press. She was already losing interest in questions that didn't center her. At night, I stopped reaching for her. Not dramatically, just naturally. I went to bed earlier. Or later. Sometimes I stayed in the living room, the glow of the TV washing over me, while Hulu played shows neither of us watched anymore. She'd pass through the room, pause, wait for me to look up. I didn't. That's when she started overcorrecting, laughing louder, touching my arm more, dropping hints about how desirable she still was. It was subtle, but frantic underneath. The evidence kept stacking quietly. Charges I didn't recognize. A protein shake brand I knew she hated. Laundry done separately now. New sports bras. A version of her that felt curated, not shared. I didn't confront her. I didn't withdraw completely either. I stayed present, calm, steady. The same way I do when I know the truth, but I'm waiting for the right moment to act. She thought she was proving something by stepping outside our marriage. What she didn't realize was that every step she took away from me made it easier for me to stop reaching entirely. The shift didn't happen all at once. That's what made it harder for her to name. I didn't announce distance. I created it. My schedule changed first. Extra hours. Voluntary overtime. Training blocks I'd postponed for years. I stopped syncing my time to hers. If she worked late, I was already gone. If she came home early, I was still out. When she asked where I was, I answered plainly. No details. No warmth. Just facts. She started waiting up. One night she suggested dinner at Applebee's, said it casually like it wasn't loaded. We sat across from each other in a booth we'd used a dozen times before. She talked about her day, about a customer who hit on her, watching my face the way someone watches a mirror to see if they still exist. I ate slowly. I didn't react. Halfway through, she reached across the table and touched my hand. I let it stay there for a second, then gently pulled away to grab my water. The movement was small. The effect wasn't. Her voice wavered after that. She asked if something was wrong. I said no, which was true. Nothing was wrong anymore. Things were simply clear. Back home, she tried again. Not seduction. Proximity. She sat closer on the couch, leaned her head against my shoulder while Hulu filled the room with noise. I stayed still, eyes forward. When the episode ended, I stood up and said I had an early shift. She stayed on the couch, staring at nothing. That's when she started tracking me. She'd text asking when I'd be home. I'd respond when I could. Sometimes hours later. Sometimes not at all. I stopped sharing my location. I stopped checking in. I stopped adjusting my body language to reassure her. I slept better than I had in months. One morning she didn't go to work. Said she felt off. I grabbed my keys anyway. As I walked past her, she looked up at me like she didn't recognize the man standing there. Like she was waiting for me to pause, to ask what was wrong, to fold back into the role I'd played for years. I didn't. I drove off in my car, the street quiet, the air steady. No rush. No guilt. By the time I got to work, my phone was vibrating nonstop. Missed calls. Messages stacked on top of each other, growing sharper by the hour. I didn't open them. From the outside, it probably looked like I was pulling away. From the inside, it felt like I had finally stopped holding something together that was already collapsing. And for the first time, she was the one standing still, waiting, realizing the ground under her feet wasn't solid anymore. I didn't confront the trainer. I didn't even look him up at first. That would have been too obvious, too emotional. Instead, I let her behavior map him for me. She started dressing differently for work. Not the kind of effort meant to be seen by customers. The kind meant to be noticed by one person. She stopped mentioning his name, which told me everything. When people feel secure, they talk. When they feel exposed, they go quiet. The opening came on a Tuesday. She forgot her phone. It was sitting on the kitchen counter when I came home early, screen dark, face down. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. I'd already seen enough fragments to know where this was going. What I did instead was open my laptop, the one I'd bought at Best Buy weeks earlier, and log into something we shared without thinking. A gym membership account. Same password she used for everything. There it was. Guest entries. Off-hours access. A pattern of visits that didn't align with her schedule. His name listed as a trainer, sure. But trainers don't sign in at midnight. They don't show up on rest days. They don't keep repeating the same private room. I closed the laptop and went for a walk. That's the thing people don't understand about control. It doesn't come from confrontation. It comes from restraint. From knowing when to apply pressure and when to let gravity do the work for you. A few days later, I made a call. Not to him. To someone who handled compliance at the gym chain. I didn't accuse. I asked questions. Framed them professionally. Liability. Risk. Boundaries. I mentioned names without attaching emotion. Just facts. I never followed up. I didn't need to. That weekend, she came home agitated. Pacing. Talking too fast. Said something vague about drama at work and people overreacting. She watched me closely, waiting for reassurance, for alignment. I gave her nothing. That night, she tried to pull me close in bed, urgency creeping into her movements. Not desire. Fear. I turned slightly away and let the space between us speak. The next morning, she left early without coffee, without makeup, without confidence. When she got back, hours later, she didn't say much. She just stood in the doorway like she wanted permission to exist in the room. I realized then that whatever she'd built with him wasn't collapsing because of exposure. It was collapsing because it was shallow, because it couldn't survive pressure, because the moment it stopped feeling secret and powerful, it became exactly what it was. Temporary. And I hadn't lifted a finger. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't begged. I'd simply stopped participating. And that was when she began to understand that I wasn't competing anymore. I was already gone. The fallout didn't come with an explosion. It came with silence where noise used to be. She stopped talking about work altogether. Duncan disappeared from her stories, like it had never existed. No names. No anecdotes. Just vague complaints and tired pauses. When people lose control of a narrative, they stop telling it. The first time I saw it happen publicly was at Costco. We ran into her sister near the produce section. Unplanned. Awkward. Her sister hugged her, then looked at me with that familiar mix of curiosity and evaluation. She asked how things were going, meaning us, not life. Before I could answer, my wife spoke too fast. Too brightly. Said everything was fine. Her sister didn't buy it. She mentioned the gym. Casually. Asked if my wife was still seeing that trainer guy. The words weren't sharp, but the pause afterward was. My wife laughed, too loud, too quick. Said people talk too much. Said it was nothing. I stood there with my hands on the cart, neutral, silent. That was the moment the balance shifted. Not because of exposure. Because of absence. I wasn't defending her. I wasn't offended. I wasn't reacting at all. And everyone felt it. On the drive home, she watched me like she expected delayed anger. A reaction she could respond to. Something familiar. When it didn't come, she turned toward the window and went quiet. Later that week, we met friends at Applebee's. The same group we'd always met. Same table. Same small talk. She sat closer than usual, trying to reclaim proximity. I didn't move. I didn't lean away either. I stayed where I was. Someone joked about how calm I always was. Said nothing rattled me. My wife smiled tightly, eyes searching my face like she was afraid of what people might see if they looked too long. On the way home, she finally broke. Not with accusations. With confusion. She said I felt different. Asked if I still cared. The question wasn't emotional. It was strategic. I told her I cared about peace, about clarity, about not forcing things that didn't want to stay. That night, Hulu played to an empty room. She sat on the edge of the bed, scrolling through her phone, refreshing messages that weren't coming. I stayed in the living room, focused, distant. Her world was shrinking. Not because anyone pushed her out, because I had stopped holding the center. And when a woman realizes the man she anchored herself to is no longer anchoring her back, panic doesn't look like anger. It looks like isolation setting in, quietly, while everyone else starts to notice. That was when she understood something she hadn't considered before. She hadn't just risked our marriage. She had miscalculated where her power came from. She started looking for ground where there wasn't any. It showed up in small ways at first. She lingered in doorways, asked questions she already knew the answers to, tried to mirror my schedule without saying it out loud. If I left early, she woke early. If I stayed out late, she stayed awake. Control doesn't disappear quietly. It panics before it collapses. At home, the silence changed texture. It wasn't tense anymore. It was hollow. Hulu still played most nights, but it sounded distant now, like background noise in a place no one lived in anymore. She'd sit beside me, close enough to touch, scrolling her phone, refreshing the same apps, waiting for something to fill the gap. Nothing did. She stopped picking up extra shifts. Duncan mornings turned into afternoons at home. She said she was tired, said she needed a break. What she really needed was an audience, someone to reflect her back to herself. I didn't. Friends stopped calling. Not dramatically, gradually. Invitations slowed. Messages went unanswered. When people sense instability, they step back. When they sense someone grasping, they disappear. She noticed before I did. One evening she asked if we were okay. Not emotionally, structurally. The way someone asks when they feel a floorboard bend under their weight. I told her we were quiet. I told her quiet wasn't the same as broken. She didn't like that answer. She tried harder after that. Not with seduction, with usefulness. Cooking meals I didn't ask for. Cleaning spaces I didn't use. Leaving notes. Small gestures designed to provoke gratitude, engagement, something to hook into. I acknowledged them politely. Thanked her. Then returned to my routine. That's when she started watching me like a stranger. The way I moved through the house without checking where she was. The way I left without explanation. The way I came back without expectation. I was still there physically. Emotionally, I'd become unreachable, like someone behind glass. She asked once if I was seeing someone else. The question was sharp, defensive. I told her no, which was true. I wasn't interested in replacing her. I was interested in not needing her. That answer landed harder than a confession would have. Late one night, she sat alone on the couch long after Hulu stopped playing. I watched from the hallway as she stared at her phone, then set it face down like it had failed her. That was the moment she realized isolation wasn't something happening to her. It was something she'd stepped into, and I wasn't going to follow. She chose the place carefully. Applebee's. Early evening. Not crowded enough to feel exposed, not empty enough to feel intimate. Neutral ground. Familiar lighting. A place where emotions could be edited down if needed. I knew what it was the moment she suggested it. Not a date. Not reconciliation. A checkpoint. She talked more than usual while we waited for our food. Filled the air with updates that didn't matter. People from work. Her sister. Small problems she could solve easily. I listened the way I do during interviews, letting the rhythm tell me more than the content. When the plates arrived, she finally slowed down. Watched me the way she used to when she was trying to decide which version of me she was dealing with. She said she felt like she was losing me. Not dramatically. Not tearful. Like someone stating a fact they didn't like. I didn't argue. I didn't reassure. I took a bite of my food and let the silence stretch. Silence makes people reveal things they didn't plan to say. She said she didn't understand when things changed. Said I used to try. Said I used to want her. The words landed flat, stripped of accusation, heavy with confusion. I told her I stopped pushing where I wasn't welcomed. That was it. No elaboration. No history lesson. She looked at me like she'd expected anger and got something colder instead. Something final. She leaned forward, lowered her voice, asked if there was someone else. I shook my head. That answer didn't calm her. It unsettled her. On the drive home, she broke the quiet again. Asked if I still loved her. The question came late, like a backup plan. I told her love wasn't the issue. Presence was. At home, Hulu played by default, the glow filling the living room. She stood in the doorway of the bedroom, blocking it without meaning to, like she was guarding something that was already gone. She asked what I wanted. I told her I wanted peace, consistency, a life that didn't require me to negotiate my worth. She asked if that meant she was losing me. I didn't answer. I went to the living room and sat down. Not to punish, not to perform, just because that's where I wanted to be. She stayed standing there for a long time after that, like if she didn't move, neither would the moment. That was the confrontation she'd been building toward. And it failed, because there was nothing left to confront. I wasn't angry. I wasn't fighting. I wasn't asking for anything. I was already on the other side of the decision she hadn't realized she'd forced me to make. And she felt it. That was the night she understood the distance wasn't temporary. It was structural. Her collapse didn't look dramatic. It looked disorganized. She started forgetting things. Appointments, groceries, conversations we'd already had. She'd come home from work at Dunkin' drained, sit at the kitchen table without turning on the lights, scrolling through her phone like she was digging for proof that she still mattered somewhere. No one was responding the way they used to. The trainer disappeared quietly. No explanation. No closure. One day she mentioned him in passing, the next she didn't. Whatever fantasy she'd built there evaporated the moment it stopped being secret and effortless. I didn't ask. I didn't need the details. What followed was worse for her. Her friends stopped checking in. Not out of cruelty. Out of discomfort. People don't like standing near someone whose life is visibly unraveling. At Costco one afternoon, I watched her struggle to make simple choices, doubling back through aisles, picking things up, and putting them down like she couldn't decide who she was shopping for anymore. She tried to pull me back in with memories. Brought up old trips, old jokes, things we used to watch together when Hulu meant something shared instead of background noise. I listened politely. I didn't reattach meaning to any of it. At night, she cried quietly, not to get my attention, because she thought she'd already lost it. That was the difference. I slept through most of it. When she finally spoke about the affair without naming it, it wasn't a confession. It was a realization. She said she hadn't known what she was risking. Said she thought I'd always be there, steady, patient, waiting. I told her I'd never promised that. That answer hollowed her out. She started seeing herself the way others had started to see her. Reactive, unstable, alone. The power she'd felt using intimacy as leverage was gone, and there was nothing underneath it to fall back on. I watched her piece it together slowly. Every moment of absence. Every time I didn't step in. Every night, I chose my own space over proximity. By then, I was already living differently. My days had structure. My thoughts were quiet. I wasn't scanning her moods anymore. I wasn't anticipating needs that weren't mutual. Her regret came in waves. Not romantic. Not dramatic. Just heavy. She understood too late that I hadn't left because of another woman. I'd left because I stopped needing to be chosen by someone who only valued me when I was reaching. And that realization broke her more cleanly than anger ever could. Because there was nothing she could argue with. Nothing she could fix. Nothing she could bargain back. Only the space where I used to be. The end didn't announce itself. It settled in. There was no final argument. No packed bags slammed against door frames. Just a quiet understanding that the shape of our life had changed, and it wasn't changing back. She moved through the house carefully now, like someone visiting a place they used to own. One morning, she asked if we could talk. Not urgently, not emotionally, carefully, like she was afraid of pushing the wrong place and watching something collapse again. We sat at the table where we'd once planned vacations, budgets, futures that felt solid at the time. She said she finally understood what she'd done. Not the affair itself, the assumption behind it. That I'd always be there. That my steadiness meant permanence. That my silence meant tolerance. She said she didn't recognize me anymore. I told her she was seeing me clearly for the first time. She asked if there was any way back. Not to how things were. She didn't insult us like that. Just back to something. Anything. I didn't answer right away. Outside, the morning was quiet. No rush. No pressure. The kind of calm that comes when a decision has already been made somewhere deeper than words. I told her I hadn't disappeared. I told her I'd simply stopped showing up where I wasn't respected. She cried then. Not loudly. Not to persuade. Because the truth had finally landed without resistance. She said she'd lost her sense of self. That everything she'd used to feel powerful had turned against her. I told her power built on control never lasts. That intimacy used as leverage always rots from the inside. She asked what would happen now. I told her I was staying. Not because I was afraid to leave. Not because I needed her. But because I was choosing to see what existed beyond the collapse. On new terms. With distance. With clarity. With boundaries that didn't need explaining. I told her if we rebuilt anything, it would be slow. Unequal at first. Honest. And it would end the moment respect became optional again. She nodded like someone accepting terms they should have understood years ago. That night, the house was quiet. No Hulu playing out of habit. No phones lighting up with distractions. Just space. I slept easily. Not because everything was fixed, but because I knew something important. Whether she changed or not no longer determined my peace. I wasn't waiting. I wasn't chasing. I wasn't proving anything. I was standing exactly where I chose to be. And for the first time, she understood that the man she almost lost wasn't coming back out of fear. He stayed only because he didn't need to. Been through it. When they crossed a line, and you made sure they felt it.